Let's see if we can get it to work. I don't know if you guys use Facebook Live, but they have changed their platform, so it
Oh,
looks a
really?
little different. Yeah, so I'm kind of experimenting with it. I think we've got it working. Awesome. So hopefully we are live and have our sound working. I'm navigating this new platform. Hello to everybody that's going to be tuning in today for our 11th episode of Teacher Talks. It's been an absolute privilege to be able to facilitate conversations with my friends and my colleagues all over the world. At this point, we've heard from educators from Europe and from all over America. We're continuing our Teacher Talks today with what I hope is the first of many listening sessions in light of the extraordinary circumstances that we are finding ourselves in, particularly in America, with the murder of George Floyd, with the protests that are happening now all over the world, with COVID-19 disrupting our public education system. We are in challenging times. I mean, I think that's the very least that can be said. And I wanted to use this platform this week to connect with some colleagues of mine that are obviously people of color, but extraordinary educators in their community. I wanted to have this, like I said, hopefully the first of many listening sessions in which we can hear from successful educators that are working in the field, a field that historically and statistically has been dominated by white men and women. 80% of the workforce in public schools right now is actually female. And so I have three male educators that I'm so excited to connect with today. We're going to hear about their experiences. Again, this is a listening session, so my goal is to sort of facilitate and navigate Zoom so that they have the platform that they need to share with us. But I want everybody that's watching to know that this is about their journey as educators and as musicians. This is in no way meant to be representative of a whole. I know these three gentlemen very well, and they are speaking for themselves and not anyone else. But it is so important as I've transitioned into higher ed to work with future educators that students see themselves in the classroom. In other words, I have been fortunate to work with and connect with aspiring educators in Texas and now here in Washington State who are people of color. And I want you to know that your success in the classroom is real and needed in communities all over the country and all over the world. That although you might not see yourself, your experience might not have been seen in the classroom, these are three men that are doing extraordinary work in their community. And I want you to see them and have the opportunity to connect with them. As we're talking to each other, please feel free to post comments or questions into the Facebook feed. I've got a second screen above me, and so I'll be bouncing up to that just to monitor it and bring in any questions or comments as we're going along. But I want to just welcome everybody to listen and hear these extraordinary educators talk about their experiences in the classroom and studying to be educators. It is extraordinary for me to connect with them. I haven't seen David in many years. We studied together at Texas Southern University. Shout out to all the TSU Tigers and the Trey, and it's amazing to be connecting with them. Charles and I were colleagues in the same region in Central Texas. He's a choir director. I'm an orchestra director, as most of you know, but we were working in the same area and connected through colleagues and seeing each other at professional events. And then Justin and I don't know if he was lucky, but I find myself lucky to have been his roommate. So we lived together when we were in college, when I was in grad school. And Justin was an incredible person to know. We worked at a local church together. He's an extraordinary musician and educator. I don't want to give too much away because I'm going to let them introduce themselves, but I wanted everybody to know that I'm not just picking people at random. These are people I truly admire for the things that they are accomplishing, and I happen to know personally, and I think that's really powerful to be able to build these kind of professional connections. So I will bounce around a little bit. I apologize if this is not the orientation of the people you see on your screen, but I'm just going to sort of cycle through each of these individuals, give them an opportunity to introduce themselves. And again, if you have any comments or questions, please feel free to post those. I'll be monitoring those and bring them into the conversation when necessary. Wanted to give a little bit of time for people to start joining us. Thank you for everybody that's watching. And I'll go ahead and start with David. So David, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're coming from, and what you're doing right now.
Yes, sir. I guess I'm the top square, so I'm first. My name is David Dukes Jr. I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia. As Dr. Hanson said earlier, attended Texas Southern University, performance major. Currently, I'm an assistant band director at Shiloh High School, which is located in Snellville, Georgia. My principal instrument is trumpet. Not to just belabor who I am, married, just recently had, as I like to jokingly tell my wife, a COVID kid, so blessed to have that in this situation. And other than that, just aspiring to be a better educator. That's long and short of who I am.
I love it. David, again, thank you for being here today and sharing your experiences with us. I'm so excited to hear more about what you've been up to and what you're doing. Charles.
Charles Flores. I teach up here just south of Austin in Hayes CISD. I'm a choir director. I got my undergrad and my master's at UTSA, and I was kind of a non-traditional student. I was in the Marine Corps for a while before I went to school, and I was in San Antonio for about 6 years, and then I've been I'm going on my 10th year as a choir director here at Hayes.
Nice.
Family, got 3 kids. They're all at the pool right now. They're waiting for me to get to them here in a little bit.
I love it. Charles, thank you for your service to our country, and thank you for your service in your community. It's been amazing to know you in Central Texas, and I'm so grateful for you being here today and sharing your experiences with us.
Thank you.
Justin.
Well, good afternoon to everyone. Yes, I am on my phone driving, so I'm not looking at the screen. I'm going to be a safe driver. But music and education-wise, I went to Texas State, as you've heard, with the Dr. Chris Hansen, beautiful man. Studied sound recording technology there. Got my degree there with also a minor in jazz performance. Started off teaching really after about 3 years. I started teaching at the Boys and Girls Club, really volunteering there because of my fraternity and community service. And then it evolved into mentorship and teaching music. I loved teaching elementary school music, and I loved it there. But after certain transitions in education, I transitioned to more of a stable math situation. I'm actually at the same campus as Mr. Charles Flores, and we've met. I love this man. I respect him. I actually pop in from time to time. He allows me to pop in. In fact, I was glad to sight read with the boys, the men's.
Oh, that's right.
And that was a beautiful time. And so he let me brush up on my solfege. And they did a great job. I'm going to brag on my colleague who did an excellent job at UIL. And I'm very proud of the work he's done at Hayes High School. I teach math. I teach geometry there. But I'm still also the worship director and music director at Word of Life Christian Faith Center, where I still serve there today.
That's brilliant. Just say it again.
And that was a little bit about me.
Yes, and Justin, thank you again for being here, sir. I'm so happy to have you. I want to represent myself honestly, so I am not Dr. Hanson yet. Keep me in your prayers. I am still dissertating, and as you can imagine, these transitions in my life have created some difficulty in trying to write and get all of that done. So God willing, by the end of this summer, I will officially be Dr. Hanson. Right now, I'm still Mr. Hanson, and I wear that title proudly.
Well, we believe in faith with you, bro.
Yes.
We believe already that it's already done, man.
We speak those things we don't see into existence.
I accept it.
Exactly.
And my wife agrees with profound amens from our living room. And I have to point out, I'd be remiss if I didn't. We've got the full gamut here because we've got an alpha and an omega. So let's keep it civil. Let's keep it civil. Justin's representing Alpha Phi Alpha right now, and Omega Psi Phi is here too. So we've got to be careful. But again, thank you all for being here. I think I'll just kind of go round robin style and open this up again for people that are just joining us. This is an opportunity for us to connect with these extraordinary educators from Georgia and from Central Texas. And today's a listening session. I'll be facilitating any comments or questions that come through, but really I just want them to have a platform to share their experiences as people of color working in education, doing extraordinary things in their community, give them an opportunity to celebrate the things they're doing and the things that their students are accomplishing through them. So, David, if you don't mind, I'm going to bounce back to you and just give you a platform to be able to talk about your experiences and what's going on in your career.
Sure. Like Charles, my route to education wasn't per se traditional. I would honestly say I kind of fought the stream. I would say to those students who are aspiring to be educators, ride the wave and also adapt to that there's more than one route to get there. For me, I got out of school. I graduated on my Lordy, which is, the good Lord saw me a way out. So when I got out, I was just so relieved that there wasn't a next step. And the pro and con to it is, yeah, you put in work, but you should always be forward thinking because that leads to idle time. So I spent about 6 months just working at Target, and I have my degree, and what's next? And my dad and my mom and everybody's asking, well, what's the next step? What's the next step? What's the next step? And my focus became linear, so I moved back to Georgia. Continued to work because, I couldn't have a degree and not have a job. But I wasn't fulfilled. So that led me to understanding what do I need to do to get on track. So fast forward, just to get ahead in the story, I went baccalaureate to get my certification. And I got blessed with the opportunity to work with my not only elementary, middle, and high school, but the guy who actually put me on the horn, I got a chance to work with him. And to this day, we still work together. So I became pupil, now I'm colleague. But to say that, that leads me to when I first got in, you are very enthused, which is not a bad thing. What you should understand coming into education is, and it's hard to know this, you will mess up. You will. It's the plight. Your ideas, veteran teachers will look at you in I use the analogy like a Lion King, like the elder lions looking at the little cubs play around and they're doing things, and the older ones are looking like, I remember when I was that silly. So a lot of your ideas won't work. Don't take it too much to heart, because it's just because an old professor told me this when I was trying to get certified. What's your philosophy of teaching? And it's always changing. It's a movable target. And the good thing about that is the ideas that you came in that were fresh and you think that were innovative, and you find out quickly that they're stupid. When you go back and revisit them, they become your style. And fast forward to it, it has allowed me to be adaptive to the change of landscape in education. When I first came in, the stylish thing for Georgia was Mac Labs, music technology. Well, so as some of you know, we didn't get our degrees traditionally in music tech. You may take one sliver of technology associated with music, and they throw you in there and it's go. Well, these kids now, they're born technologically savvy. So you may have a kid that's 9 or 10 years old that can hook this Mac Lab up, so you got to stay ahead of the curve. So being adaptive, I let my kids teach me. I use the circular method, like the Calvin cycle. You breathe out carbon, and the flowers give you back oxygen. So when I give them something, I say, well, show me what you learned on YouTube, because a lot of them have YouTube channels, they have Snapchat channels, and they feed off each other, because the best teaching method that I can utilize is guided peer. I can tell a kid right posture, theory, till I'm blue in the face. But if their peers say, oh yeah, do it this way, verbatim, they get it. So I've had a lot of success by having kids, high flyers, and mixing them in. The kids who need help and the high flyers. Kids who need help get frustrated because they don't get it. Kids who get it are frustrated because you got to help the low flyers. Well, utilize them to minimize the gray hairs. So that's just a brief introduction of how I went in, and I'm steadily trying to improve my craft. From teaching to we arrange the songs for marching band and drills, I always keep what I've done not as just a reflective, not as reflective measure to be like to say, oh, look what I've done, but more as a look where I've come from and steal the ideas for myself. Because I've listened to things that I first arranged, and I'm like, good God, my theory teacher would be so ashamed. And Chris, you're shaking your head. You know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yes.
So just be adaptive. That's the long and short of it. And there's no one way. I mean, there's a traditional route, 4.5 years, then get your grad. And no, everybody's plight is different, which makes you you.
David, thank you so much. And I really can't say how much I appreciate that, working with future educators. I was a non-traditional educator as well, did an emergency cert, and there's so much value in that, of being able to have multiple avenues into the classroom. And you brought so much real experience to your students. And I love that you're doing it. Charles, tell us about what's going on with you.
Well, same thing. I got out of high school. I went to college for a couple years, and no. So my dad was an Army officer. A lot of my family is military. Since I was young and no connections or tie downs, I decided to join the military, and so I joined the Marines. When I got out, I initially, I started out as a history major, and I kept singing and doing things via other routes. And then those last couple of years of that degree, I got involved with the opera workshop at Texas State.
Wow, nice.
And once I got back onto the stage and doing stuff again, it was like, okay. So with about 18 hours left in the history degree, I changed majors and went down. My voice teacher there at Texas State Time, actually, we talked about it. I came back home to San Antonio, and I finished my degree at UTSA in just under 3 years. And had some really good experiences. I was fortunate to meet up with good faculty and staff. I was really nervous as an older student because by that point, I was a good 6-8 years or more older than a lot of the students I was with. But the faculty that I had was real encouraging. I think for me, adaptability, like you said, David, is really important. If we're going to be a little vulnerable here, I think one of the things looking back on it for me was, when I finally got to be in the classroom as a choir director and doing all these cool things, part of me was in a rush to make up for the lost time. So, I was rebuilding a program at a school that needed a director to stick around. My interview for that job was exactly 5 minutes long because his only question was, how long are you going to stay here? I know you're qualified, but he couldn't keep a director there for more than a year or two. And so my response was, if you leave me alone and let me do my job, I'll give you 6 years. And he did. And we were able to turn the program around. And I think to this day, some of those beautiful moments as a teacher happened in there. But it was a process. And I learned a lot, and my first 3 years were rough because I kind of wanted to get Rome built in a day. And I got way ahead of myself. I almost quit, I think, after my third year. And then I had a very close friend and colleague take me to dinner one night, and he just gave it to me. That was the hardest conversation, but it was a hard, truthful, you're messing up, this is how, this is why, this is what you need to do to fix it if you want this to go on. And I learned from that. I mean, I had to really let myself hear those things and realize that, my students are my students. They're nobody else's students, and we're going to grow in the way we're going to grow.
Yes.
And once I saw that for what it was, instead of keeping my eyes outward, we were able to have some really great successes. And very fortunate that I still keep in touch with a lot of those students today. But that was David Custer. A lot of you choir directors probably know him.
Yeah.
But he asked me if I wanted to hear it, and I told him yes. And so he took a deep breath, and there it was. But that was the greatest evening, I think, of my life and my career. Like, really helped me to kind of keep my eyes level. And it served me well when I moved up to Hayes. I had to tell myself, okay, I'm new here. This is a new process, a new program. And I need to not be afraid to be me, and I need to be okay with other things happening however they're going to happen. And Hayes was a challenge because it was very different from my first school. And so I had to make some adjustments there. But I think that was a single thing. You know, if you're an older student and you're getting into this, don't feel the need to make up for lost time. Just start where you are, and the things will happen for you. And frankly, you will have a lot to contribute as an older person in the room. And know that you've got value and worth with that as well.
Charles, that's brilliant. Thank you for that. And it's amazing. I hope some of my students that are able to listen to this, that they see this translation from the theory to the practical. This is something I'm always struggling with, and even I struggled with as a student. I think all of you can attest to that. You know, you read all these books, and it's great to read about classroom management in a book, but until you are in the classroom in front of the kids, it doesn't mean anything. And so there's that, exactly what you articulated is what is talked about, that third year is the hump. I mean, and there are lots of different models and ways of looking at it, but it's a lot of what is promoted is that it's 5 years to become quote unquote a master teacher. And that third year is the hump. That's where the attrition rate is for educators. And I can't remember now, but it was something like 60 or 70% of new educators end up quitting before their third year. I mean, it's just something atrocious that if you don't make it to that third year, but it makes sense in your first year, you're trying to figure it out. You're trying to learn the system. You're trying to learn your campus and your admin. In the second year, you can practice reflection and you can look at what worked and what didn't work and try new things. And the third year is really where you are your educator. I mean, that's where you have established a relationship with your kids. You know what's going on. You know what worked and didn't work. And if you can get past that third year, that's where you really take the plunge. I swore I was going to be in it for 2 years max, and I stayed in public education for 8 years, you know, and every year I thought, oh, this is going to, you know, once I got past that, and I was with you, sir, at that third year, I started applying for other jobs. I was ready to leave, but it's so important to get past that to understand what it is. And I don't want to take over this, but it just resonates with me so greatly because someone put this on me, and I've been telling my students ever since. In any other discipline that performs the social service that educators do, so if we're looking at law enforcement, or if we're looking at the medical field, or if we're looking at politics, or local government and municipal work, in any other field, there's always law. That's the other one for like people that practice law. There's always some sort of an extended internship or some sort of a residency, and educators just sort of get thrown in, if you really think about that. Because with lawyers, you're not actually in the court doing your own thing for years. For doctors, you're not on your own practicing by yourself for years. It takes years to be in residency to build those practical skills and then be there. So it's the same thing from new educators. I was just as wishful and hopeful, and I'm going to come in and change the world my first year. It takes years. It doesn't matter who you are. It takes years to establish who you are, just like it would in any other profession that is working with human beings. We're not working with widgets. These are real people we have to teach and work with. So thank you for that, because those are such true words of wisdom for people to give themselves time once they're in the classroom. I love it. Justin, talk to us a little bit about what's going on for you.
Wow. I'm already inspired listening to my fellow colleagues in the industry, I like to call it. I'm another non-traditional teacher. I did not graduate with a teaching degree. In fact, I thought I was going to work in a music studio the rest of my life. Chris can remember, I certainly had music blaring in my room as a college roommate. But as I was mentoring at Boys and Girls Club, I saw a need. And this is pretty much my philosophy that came towards education. Be the role model that you didn't have, or be the teacher that you didn't have. I'll preface that. I'll kind of follow up with this. One thing I see on social, like Facebook sometimes, is that how old were you until you had a Black male teacher? And some people would be 0, like I wasn't until I was in college, or it wasn't until I was in the 12th grade, or I was getting my doctorate, and it was so rare to see a person that was in that position. Then the other thought was, how rare was it to see a male teacher? That was, I had to think back on my entire educational experience, and I realized there's, other than a coach, it was only maybe 2 or 3 teachers that I can remember that were just male, that just wanted to be there and teach. And then the other part was disciplinary wise. I was the ADD kid. I was the one that was sent to the office at 2nd grade way too many times. I remember in 4th grade, I was sent to ISS. They didn't even have ISS in elementary school. I was the one that invented it. And so on, different thoughts. I had all these just bad memories of experiences with teachers that, in my opinion, I thought I was a witty kid. I thought I was a smart kid. I didn't think that I should have gotten in trouble the way I did. And the way they dealt with me was really because they didn't know how to relate with me. Mm-hmm. And I always thought about being the teacher or the role model that a child never had. Whereas the relationships that I could forge first before my content, whatever content that was going to be, because I did not care what I taught. I only cared that the student wanted to learn what I learned. Mm-hmm. And so then that was pretty much my philosophy. So getting into music, I started off, bless you, my wife's next to me. Getting into music, I was so excited to start teaching elementary school music. Why? Because in elementary school, the only thing that I got past, in elementary school was just maybe a touch of keyboard and a way too much recorder. And I remember that was like a weed out period in music education, was like the recorder, where every kid seemed to just hate that recorder.
I don't know why we teach it.
And for what it's worth, but honestly, so many kids that I remember that were alongside with me in music class. Music class used to be the best time of the day, and we loved going to music class, but as soon as she pulled out the recorder, we were like, oh God, I hate you. I can't do anything that's fun. And I always remembered that. I remembered that. So I thought about, like, what kind of teacher would I be? Okay, I'm going to be never picks up a recorder. We're going to pick up guitars. We're investing in guitars. So we're at the Boys and Girls Club in South Central Texas, and we were in San Marcos, and they invested in 12, 15 guitars. And we taught all of those kids, 5th grade and younger, how to play guitar. It was a guitar ensemble. And they were so excited. Parents were running up to me, finding me in the parking lot saying, thank you, my son, my daughter is loving music. We're talking about the Beatles. We're listening to music together. We're exploring chords together. And I'm like, yes, this is what I want for y'all. I want you to have fun exploring music. This is my job as an educator, to open up what you already want to do. So many kids, for me, come to me with, honestly, their own plans. Like, if it's music, they came to me with, like, I want to learn guitar, or I want to learn drums, I want to write music, I want to learn violin. And I'm like, okay, let's do that. I'm kind of a reverse person where I love to jump into the deep end and learn to swim later. So that was my philosophy. And I fast forward that to even now I'm in math. I'm at Hayes High School, where when I got to Hayes High School, I thought the same thought, like, what kind of math teacher did I have? Did they care? Did they want me to learn their content, or are they just kind of there to be there? And it was very kind of hard for people to find a very enthusiastic math teacher. And so geometry was my absolute favorite. I don't know why, but geometry was my favorite. And praise God, I was selected to be a geometry teacher at Hayes High School. And so once I realized that I love geometry, I love to teach this content, it's going back to my original thought. Am I just going to be a teacher, or am I going to be the teacher? I always think about the teacher that people remember over the course of years, because kids pretty much experience maybe about 30 people that influence their lives between pre-K all the way through their college years. So it can be easy to be forgotten, but I love trying to be the teacher that made at least one memorable impact in that content area. And that's been the driving force of my educational career. I took the alternative certification route during that time. I was hired on kind of an emergency cert. and I finished it during that semester at Hayes. It was actually spring of 2017, and so I just finished that third year, as we were just talking about, and I'm very much excited to see what the future holds.
It's huge. Justin, thank you for sharing that. I'd love to, now that we know a little bit more about each of you, I'm just going to open this up for any that wants to share some of the experiences that you've had in the classroom that you think future educators should know about, and anything that you want to offer in light of other things that are going on. So particularly, obviously, there with the murder of George Floyd, there's a response right now to diversity, equity, and inclusion and restructuring systems, particularly within education and such. But also, we're still battling this global pandemic. And all of us have been affected by that in terms of our teaching, having to transition online. This is sincerely an incredibly unique time that we're finding ourselves in as educators, of trying to still make connections and facilitate meaningful experiences for our students. So I'd love to know for each of you, what are some of your strategies for success in the classroom in general, or how have you been able to respond to stuff that's going on right now and still find success with your students? Anything you're willing to share, and this is open to anyone.
I guess some box number one. On a serious note, I'll leave names out. But I think it was maybe I guess since we said third, yeah, it was my third year. Interesting enough, you find that each year you acquire, whether it's voluntarily or totalitarian, that you're going to wear different hats. So for me, I could never have fathomed the social family dynamics that I would deal with being, when I came in, I was just so excited to be the band director. But you're not just the band director. You're for me, I'm not as old as the father figure yet, but I was the uncle or the guy that could, provide lunch, or the guy that's providing the girl, hey, you look, you're fine. Everything's going to work out, being that support system. Well, with that comes, I'll be straight to the point. There was a brother duo that tried to kill their parents. Oh. And one of the brothers played football, and one of the brothers was in the band. And it wasn't a prototypical thing where we saw it coming. One was a previous football player for the school and went off to the military, would come back and visit. The younger brother was in the band, percussionist, parents, two-parent household, helped with both football, was on the football club, was a band parent, booster club, helped provide meals every Friday. So I say that to lead to the many hats that you'll wear that you don't go to school for. You have to be a psychologist, you have to be a doctor, you have to be, in this case, lawyer. And so, not to scare you, but if someone told me ahead of time, just be wary that you are not just the band director. I think it was said too, like, be that teacher. You will become that teacher as a music educator, because we have the advantage. I'm married to a math teacher, and I always joke with her that I married her because I'm not good at math, so I married smart. But I tell her the advantage I have over her is that I get them for extra years. I get them coming in 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade. So I see them grow. Whereas traditional teachers only get them for that semester, that year if they're lucky. We get them and we see them grow a mustache, and graduate. And then they come back married. So just that different hat is just eye-opening, because you don't just have to teach some theory. It goes back to my favorite movie growing up was Mr. Holland's Opus. And you really do those things. Not to be corny, but you do those things. And you have to balance them out, because I never could fathom doing the things that I have. Stretching over the strategy, that again reinforces let them teach you and utilize them. Meaning, I had a bad habit of not you doing the D word, delegating.
Mm-hmm.
You're only one person, so you can't set up the mic system. You can't tune up this section. You can't write the music. You can't do a permission slip. You can't do this. So utilize the help, because you can do everything yourself. What you'll find again is like my colleagues are saying, that year 3, you'll get there and you'll hit the wall, and it's strong. And only 2 things in my estimation that'll help you is if you just keep running into that wall, and Lord willing, you get the goal accomplished, or you have some motivating factor, someone, as I think Charles, you said it, someone to say, hey, I saw you hit the wall. I was just going to see how hard you hit it. And just to give you that uplift, because I like what you said, Chris. We are dealing with people's arguably most prized possession with the highest accountability. It's like, here's your degree. They don't say, here's your degree, here's a scalpel. But for us, it's here's a degree, here's a baton, and here's the budget. Here's the problems from the last program. Here's this, here's that. Is this booster meeting tomorrow? You need to be there. So,
Amen.
Not to scare anyone, just be ready to wear multiple hats and take each one of those multiple hats to scope your strategy. For me, delegation is key. Yeah, I'm still struggling with it myself, because I'm the assistant, so I'm the one helping the head guy delegate. So it tells me and shows me the different things that you have to deal with as a director. So delegate, wear different hats.
That's brilliant. Thank you, David.
I'd love to jump in on that real quick. I'm sorry, Sean.
Okay.
I was just thinking about like that multiple hats portion, and you're very much right. I'm also the assistant swim coach at Hayes as well. But I think about what made an effective teacher for me this past couple of years is that I purposely tried to wear the teacher hat last. As we're talking to a lot of musical educators and educators in general, I realized that I'm going to share a comment that a student shared with me. They said, Mr. Payne, I'm so glad you're not a Texas State teacher. I was like, whoa, chill off my school. What would you say that? And so on and so forth. And I asked them, why would you say that? They said, well, Hayes High School has a close relationship with Texas State. And so Texas State is always kind of sending their either interns or student teachers. But because Texas State has been doing what they've been doing for so long, they are very a little rigid in classroom and based and going by the book, and they're great by the book. Their book is great, yeah. But the kids felt no connection with the student teachers or no connection with the interns that say they represent Texas State University and their education program. And they said, I'm so glad you're not a Texas State teacher, because really they were experiencing so many people walking in their classrooms, not making connections, but still knowing so much about content, but couldn't bridge the gap.
Yeah. So
that was said during my first semester at Hayes, because I was technically a long-term sub there as I was getting my certificate, my alternative, going the alternative route. So with that, I always kept that in my head. Don't be that teacher that they hate. So every other hat I wore proudly. Like if they wanted to talk about their day, I wanted to talk about it with them. I would spend 2-3 minutes at the beginning of class, be like, how are you? What is that? Mm-hmm. Like, and really mean it. I would actually, does it feel tense? Do we need to take a breath? Do we all okay? Like what, do we need to listen to My Chemical Romance? Where do we need to connect?
Always.
For a half second before I just throw a whole bunch of geometry at you. Because I know geometry is a beast anyway when you get to that year. So I know what I have to teach is going to be challenging enough, but I'm also trying to have enough humanity to recognize that they're little humans too. that you're navigating this crazy, huge world, and especially in high school, where you're trying to balance your own particular growth, your own identity, your own expression, your own romantic feelings, and then teachers who you think care or don't care or never will care, and then you're trying to balance all this new information. So I always try to wear, like Mr. said, the hat, the psychology hat, the therapist hat, the counselor hat, the appropriate male role model hat first before I ever try to get to the quote unquote teacher, because I honestly feel the more hats I wear that way, the more I put on a good teacher hat. If I've already established connections, I always kind of preach connections before content. The more I've made these connections as an educator, the more I've had students say, okay, thank you for that. Now, let's learn some geometry. That's another phrase in my classroom. All right, now back to geometry, because they know I'll take enough time out of my day to talk about with them whatever's going on with them, and then still structure the time to go back to my content area. And so the class management has not been about the proximity all time or certain redirection. Sometimes the classroom management that's been best successful for me is simply classroom relationship management. How well did I manage my relationships with my students so that way they trust that I have their best interests at heart, my content, and with their character. So that's my little way.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Justin. Charles, you were going to say something.
Well, I guess it'll be a piggyback on all this. When I had to stop at that third year and reevaluate, the one of my big takeaways from my conversation with David was, David Custer was, I had to quit trying to do it the way I saw other people do it, and I had to look and find the things about me that could achieve those same goals. And so for me, building relationships I knew was important. And I knew that there needed to be a vision and a goal for the program and for the students. So I basically applied some good old Marine Corps leadership, and rule number one was you take care of your people.
Yep.
And so I made it a practice to try and be available for my students as much as possible. And I think, everybody's got their different ways of doing that. And so for me, I just had to find ways to make that happen for my students. And the more comfortable I got with that, the more, you're like you were talking about the classroom management discipline, you find yourself worrying about less because you're making those connections. And so that when you're in the rehearsal then or the class, I'll never forget one of the moments where I felt like I was finally doing it right was when I picked up this guy mid-year and he kept cutting up during the rehearsal. And one of my boys turned around and put his hand on his shoulder and said, "We don't do that here."
Yes.
Like all the other boys just looked at him, and then we just went on, and that was it. Like,
yeah,
there wasn't a write up. There wasn't a look. I'm gonna have to call your ma, stuff like that. And I think individually, you just have to find the parts of your character and your personality that you can connect over to your students. And I think that's part of this profession, which is so cool because that can look very different from room to room. I think you can have a sense that things are, there's a clear way to see that things are being accomplished. But it's also clear to see that it doesn't have to be the same way from room to room because we're all different and we all bring our experiences and who we are. And more importantly, when your students see that you're willing to do that instead of being this regimented, if I wanted that, I would have just stayed in the Marine Corps. And I love the Marine Corps. Don't get me wrong. But that wasn't. That's not why I got into teaching. And I think and when you're talking about students, and David, you said this about the fact that we're giving something much more important than a scalpel. We're giving these lives, and that's and we do get to spend more than 1 or 2 or 3. Like some of my seniors that graduated this year, I've known them since the 7th grade.
Yeah.
And, that's incredible that you get to have that kind of influence and be around. I would like to add this to it if I could, because we had mentioned this earlier. I want to speak briefly as a man. when I came into my job, the person that had that job before me had been there for 18 years, and it was a woman. And I lost kids that first year. They did not want a guy in the room. And I didn't know how to deal with that. I never saw it that way. So at first, all I could think was, well, I'm not going to make you stay here. Kid want to leave, you want to leave. And then I got a really touching letter for my second year in from a senior that left and said, I just want you to know that I had misgivings about you because you were a man. And then she goes on to say, that I still found myself learning and being able to grow and develop. And so for her, it was a moment to see that, okay, someone else can do this job, and that was very encouraging to get that. I think it is, for a long time, nurses the same way. Most of the nurses are women, not very many are men. And we tend to, I'm not really sure where I'm going with that other than to say that that can be done as well. And I think our young people need to see guys doing the best they can and demonstrating the best they can, so that they see both sides of that, the character modeling, the leadership. I think that goes a long way. I really can only think of Mr. Bazan was my first grade teacher. I think the vast majority of them were men, except for my choir director. They were coaches otherwise. And that's not a good or a bad thing. It just is. But yeah. I can tell you that Mr. Bazan left an incredible impression on me. He was a fair teacher. He treated everyone the same way. Like, I learned a lot from just watching that guy as a dinky little first grader. And so if that's worth discussing, great. If not, but I do remember that my first couple of years there, and that's not good or bad either. The lady before me did a fantastic job, and that was what they were used to, and that's what it came down to. Young people, they're used to what they're used to, and then when something comes in that's different, and then especially when it's really different, so like in this case, a guy from a girl, I can understand why some of them would kind of have okay, I'm going to tap out, or maybe come back the following year. Human beings are creatures of habit, and when our scenery changes, when things change, when circumstances change, that's a real test of who we are. And some people can make that change immediately, and some people not so much, and then some people unfortunately not at all. But that was an interesting experience coming up here from where I was before.
Yeah. I think that's a product of, we're all guilty of the social norms that we can't usually explain where they came from. Like if you take a girl and a boy, we tend to give the boy the blue truck and the girl the pink truck because those are socially the normal things. So I think this profession has gone through that. We all studied the history of education, and originally it was the older Caucasian gentlemen who were the teachers. And then there was a shift over to now you have Caucasian women, and that seems to just be the prototypical model. And like you said, change is always uncomfortable. You can be the most brilliant one, but if they're used to that, you have to, I think, like you said, that changing of the guard always adds that 1 year to year 3. So if you hit the wall year 3, if you're coming into an established program, that first year is always going to be filled with, well, such and such used to, well, she left this and maybe this can help you. And you don't want to come in with the bulldozer and scrap everything because, like you said, you're naturally going to lose kids because you're different. But the analogy that, and I had mentors that gave me a lot of analogies, but this one is pointing to the point that you had, especially about male nurses. And this guy said, well, think about it this way. If you had a hole in your body and you said, I only wanted a male doctor, and the female doctor said, you don't want me to patch you up? That guy said, eventually you're going to hurt bad enough to don't care who's going to fix you. You just want that hole closed. So the same thing is true with the kids. The kids, at the end of the day, they will have a thirst for knowledge. Now, the way they get to it is different. There are different factors that equate to, again, like you said, with the male teachers. The thing in my demographic, I teach in a high concentration of African American Hispanics. And what I find is, but the trend in that demographic is single parent homes. Mm-hmm. So one day I had an issue with a young lady, and it was a guy too, and they just would always just run amok. It's like when bell rings, bing, it's like they had a competition to drive me crazy. I just said, let me stay consistent. I have simple rules. Just do what I say. That's my rule. Pretty simple. Just do what I say. But not to be facetious, but I work in a lab. So one of the main rules I have is no food or drink. That's the whole first month. I have to fight tooth and nail, but eventually they acquiesce. So the next thing I find out is they rebel against consistency. And then I found one of my favorite slogans I use is, Lord willing, I'm gonna be here tomorrow. And that, what I found is, we as educators are one of the most consistent factors in their life.
Yes. Because
sometimes I hear the backstory. Yeah. They don't stay in the same place. They stay with different people, but they look at me, and if I'm not in class, they worry, because one kid told me, he said, "You never take off," and he's right, because I feel like if I take off, number one, it takes so much work to do sub work.
Yes.
And I might as well come in. To be honest, be quite frank, but to be honest, speaking from my heart, I feel like I'm missing something. Mm-hmm. Like, I spend more time taking care of the outside stuff, but I'm in the back of my mind, I'm like, man, did I leave? I should go up there and check and see if they practiced. I just need to check in. It's just innate. And my wife's like, no, I'll leave it alone. But that's because I want to be that consistent factor. Mm-hmm. You know, we all, Chris can attest to this. When I told my wife, we had theory every day. And I asked the theory teacher, and even music history, you know who that is.
Ooh, Julie Arjane.
I asked her, why do we have to come to class every day? And she said quite poignantly, she said, well, when you start working, you got to come to school every day. And that stuck with me. So that consistent piece helps with that, you know, factor of just the slice and a half. They're just social norms. If you see a big dually truck go down the street, look at that guy. And then there's a little 4'10" young lady jump out, you're like, whoa. But we have to wrap our head around that there's a change, or that there has to be a change, because the kids are changing. They aren't the same kids. You can't connect with kids now through read this book. There are a lot more kids that are hands-on, that are, you know, used to, okay, you're gonna show me something and leave, because they're used to that. And yeah. I feel your pain. You know, I walked into they made me teach music theory, which was quite interesting, because that means I had about 40 kids who didn't have any aspiration on doing any music. So what do? And it's like you said, it becomes humbling, because they also, the negative part of being a man in education, I have no problem, and I know you don't have any problem being military, with dropping the hammer. So do you want me to provide that sense of discipline, or do you want me to be comforting? So I feel like that's another fight that we fight on the side of being males as teachers. You want me to be very strong and stringent, and mm-hmm. you go to class and check in here. And, well, how about let me be hey, man, you did a good job. Hey, man, give me
yes.
that. You know, there's that dichotomy, you know, which is just the education. So that's a good topic to bring up, because I know how you feel with both coming into a program that had someone that was a stalwart, and then on top of it, that next layer of that person being another sex. So, I mean, I think if I can impart to your students that avenue of that, stay consistent. Stay, again, delegating, stay consistent, because it's just the feel. It's just like we said earlier, those young men who going to be nurses, you're going to get eyes of stares of why are you trying to be a nurse? And they'll always think the negative. Well, I want to be a nurse. What's wrong with that? You don't want to be the next question I asked you, you must didn't want to be a doctor. You couldn't be a doctor. No, I wanted to be a nurse because of insert my reasons.
Yeah.
Same thing with teaching. I want to be a teacher because I felt, and run down the list for me. And it's different for each one. And to piggyback on what somebody else said, just to drop a seed in it, each one of us are in different respective states. I think we're all under the umbrella of NAFME, but then we spleen with, for me, it's GMEA, and I know it's TMEA, and is it
WMEA?
Yeah. So, but when we do that, I think the cumbersome thing about teaching music is that traditional classes have these standards. They will learn A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And they try to pigeonhole us. And one of the most abstract standards, and I just want to see if this is across the nation, number one is sing and play instrument alone or with others.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, this must have been, and I've been in curriculum meetings and strategies meetings, and I'm like, can we be less ambiguous or more ambiguous to that? Because when you say that, when I put that in lesson plans or tell the administrator that's observing, if I spend the whole class period talking to the student, then they come back to this. Well, I have to talk to them first to understand this is how you're going to feel playing an instrument, or this is how you're going to feel with proper posture before we even get into these, because that's going to lead to that. Well, you didn't do that. It wasn't put in there in the lesson plan. So it's not a pigeonhole. So as was eloquently stated, it's going to look different in our 4 prospective classrooms, but we can be teaching the exact same standard.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Just a little something that was in my craw and I want to see.
Yeah. I hear y'all, man. But one thing I try to impress upon my students is quickly have them understand the only constant is change.
Yep.
So sometimes being consistently inconsistent is a good consistency for my students. They expect that I will be unexpected. They expect that I will be at times random, and even though for me it's planned randomness, but for them, I mean, being in the math portion of our education is that I have to teach them something brand new, spanking new every day, pretty much. So what I like to do. I think I'm just connected. All right, am I connected yet? All right.
There you go. Okay.
Okay. So I try to deconstruct the social norm from day one. Mr. Flores, I'm not sure if you've heard the stories around the halls, but basically I have a first day of school, wait, he's what? Moment with every one of my students. And I've done it for the past 3 years, where I do the entire day in an entirely British voice. So I do all my syllabus the entire time like this. So I say, okay, my name is Mr. Payne. Yes, obviously I'm British. Let's get out the way. And I just do my entire lesson back. So the thing is, all of my students hear this voice. They see a 6'4", 245-pound black man who is sounding like he's definitely not from here. And he's not breaking character the entire time. And so when all of this is going on, I have students just looking around left, right, left, right, left, right. They're like, oh my God, is he faking? Is it true? What is this? They're texting their parents. Oh my gosh, I have some British black teacher that's going on. I don't know what, their mind is blown. And then I come back the second day of school talking like this. They're like, why are you talking like this? I said, I'm practicing my American accent. They say it's horrible. and I'm like, and so then I do another thing. I'm like, well, maybe I should sound like this. And then how about that? One person's like, oh my God, you sound like my uncle. I'm like, I know, I listen to everybody. And so I go through like sometimes a series of accents. It helps break the ice for me. But then it is a social deconstruction, because I also know that, number one, I'm a male teacher. Number two, I'm African-American male teacher, which is also, if I'm looking at our particular brand of students, it is certainly Very, 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 very few African American students there. Then it'd be Hispanic Americans and still majority Caucasian American students at that school. So seeing a black male teacher is extremely rare in this process if it's not a coach. So I have to almost kick down so many doors, but I do so intentionally so that when I start revealing my personality for what it really is, they're almost expecting, they're not expecting whatever social norm they thought walking in the door of that classroom experience. And I think that's very important if we're talking also in the music realm, because if we keep doing what everybody else did, we can't, honestly, we really can't always expect to get what everybody else got. Every music teacher that meant something to somebody, actually, when I say meant something, they showed something or revealed some secret about a composer, about a personal experience with this. There's a connectivity that existed versus just the content itself. And so by showing my students that you're always going to have to be working hard in this classroom, but there's always an element of change that's going to happen. I expect you to get this to get harder. That's another one of my slogans. It only gets harder. That is in my classroom. It is written in Sharpie on my whiteboard. It's not going to be erased. It only gets harder. ... And I teach them the second half of the phrase as they get better. It only gets harder, but I'm going to get better. And that is part of their journey of unexpectancy. I've never seen this before. I don't understand what's going on, but I'm going to start owning my processes on how to process this information, how to get over this rehearsal hump, how to get over this difficult section of learning. And that has been really, really rewarding in my musical and or my math education journey.
Yeah. Justin, thank you so much. I can't believe it's already been an hour. The time goes so insanely fast, and I want to respect what all of you are navigating in your own lives. You've taken time today to be able to connect with us. And so I'm going to end this session, but for everyone that has been watching, this is definitely not the end of the conversation. All these gentlemen are on social media, and I'm happy to connect you to them if you need me to. And they're, again, doing incredible work in their communities, and I hope offer an incredible example of what it means to be a male educator, to be an educator of color, to be working in communities, diverse communities. Again, the point of this listening session is to have a platform in which you guys can share these experiences and allow people, particularly future educators that are people of color, to see themselves in the classroom, that it is a possibility. This was not intended, but I firmly believe it's God's providence that all of you had non-traditional pathways into the classroom. I think I sort of knew that, but it was, I guess maybe I should claim it was intentional so I can take credit for it. But it's amazing to me because it is so important for people to see that and to recognize what opportunity really looks like in their life and to see the significance of what you're doing. As arguably as sort of cliche as this could be, and I hope you take this as a very sincere compliment, just the fact that you are pushing against these standards, against these social norms, that, oh yeah, if I'm going to be in the choir classroom, I'm going to learn from a white woman. And it's not to discredit what white women bring to the choir classroom, but there are these expectations that we're all going to face. And it was amazing, Charles, I don't know if you intended to do this, but I had to close with this. The words that you chose were so incredibly wise and speak directly, I think, to what we're all being challenged by right now. We are in a time of change. I mean, COVID-19 has forced all of us to reimagine what public education looks like and what students need and how we provide for them. The murder of George Floyd has challenged all of our perceptions of what systemic racism means and how it matures in our culture and our society and how we respond to that. We are in a season of change. So many things are changing. And I'm borrowing your words, if you don't mind, Charles, but people have three options, right? They're either going to lean into it and they're going to appreciate and embrace the change and run with it. They're going to struggle with it, and it's going to take them time to change, or they're not going to change at all. And exactly what you experienced going into your choir room, I think that's what's happening now. Some people are just floored with online learning, and it's the best thing that's happened for their classroom, and they're flourishing in it, and their students are enjoying it. Of people, I mean, I say unfortunately because I think our students suffer from it, have dug their heels in the ground. They're not going to do online learning. They're not doing a virtual ensemble. They're not going into Google Classroom. We see this living out in our own lives. And I think all three of you are incredible testaments to looking at the opportunity that exists for educators. And I have to quote a former colleague of mine, incredible educator, Mark Stedman, who's in the biology department at San Marcos High School. This just kept coming back to me, and I think this is a great place for us to end. He sat down with me one day. I was struggling, go figure, it was in my third year, talking to him, trying to get some inspiration. And he said, Chris, let me ask you a question. What do you teach? And I kind of looked at him because I was like, I've been here for 3 years. You know what I teach? What are you talking about? And he goes, what do you teach? And I said, well, I teach orchestra. And he goes, no, you don't. And I'm thinking, yeah, I do. I'm pretty sure that's my job. And he goes, ask me the same question. And here I am. He's like a legendary biology teacher, right? Everybody knows him. He's an incredible educator. I said, what do you teach? He says, I teach human beings. That's what I teach. Now, if you ask me what subject or what content I communicate, then we can talk about science and biology. He's like, but we teach human beings. That's our job, not to teach content. And Justin, you said the same thing, and David, you said the same thing. It's so powerful and Charles, I can just imagine that first day in your classroom, how powerful it is for people to see male educators, educators of color, educators with different gender identities in general, just to see diversity in front of them, teaching them and guiding them through this and teaching human beings. It's so powerful for future educators and communities in general to see that and to reimagine these cultural norms, to understand that it can be different. You know, David, if you want to hand your son a pink truck, you hand that boy a pink truck, and it's still going to drive just like the blue truck. You know, it's amazing.
Purple.
Is it purple? Exactly. Purple and gold, the only way.
It could have been black and gold.
Well, again, I just have to thank you guys. This is so inspiring and so incredible. Again, for everybody that watched this episode, I'll put it up on YouTube for anybody that missed it. I want to respect your time and let you guys go. I'll actually ask you to hang around a little bit while I close the live feed so I can thank you again personally. But to everybody that watched, if you missed it, or if you, in particular, for my colleagues that are in higher ed, if you have students of color that are struggling with internship placements or with their own experiences in the classroom of not seeing themselves, I want you to be able to share this with them and show this testament to these incredible educators that are changing students' lives, and let them see the reality that you can go into the classroom, you can make a difference, you can master your content, but you can connect with human beings in an incredible way through education. So thank you all again. Thank you to everyone that was watching. I'll look forward to seeing you guys next week.